I believe we absorb thought patterns and beliefs. So if you're struggling with a lot of lack or feeling limited, feeling small, anything that we talked about on the show, struggling to manifest, connect with people who have that down. Either in person or listen to podcasts or whatever, go to events, because you will inherently start to take some of that in.
Exploring the human journey.
Ever since I was little, I've seen and sensed ghosts and other beings, and I actually thought I was crazy growing up because I'm very observant and I could tell that other people weren't sensing what I did. And so I basically just kept it to myself and didn't tell other people what I was experiencing. And then when I was in college, a family friend described a ghost that I had seen but never told anybody about, and he described this ghost in detail to me. And I knew at that point that it wasn't just in my head, but I was still pretty freaked out. So at that point I did the only thing that I knew how to do, which was to shut it out. Ended up in a very bad place in my life where I was living life very analytically and just completely ignoring everything that was coming in. And that's the point that was the real turning point, where I opened up psychically, started to take classes, acknowledged what was there, and learn how to face it instead of just trying to pretend that it wasn't there. So now I'm known as a celebrity psychic. I do work with celebrities that are still alive. I also channel celebrities on the other side. This started happening when I just would open the channel and these celebrities would show up. And I honestly at first was very surprised, like, why is Frank Sinatra here, or Abraham Lincoln, or whoever showed up. But over time I learned that they are also looking to share messages. They don't stop once they pass. And so since that's part of what I was doing, they were there to communicate and had messages that they wanted out in the world. I really don't believe that when our body dies that we die. Even though we say we die, it's really just the death of the physical body. The soul continues on the other side, and that awareness actually expands. So I think when we're incarnated, it's like we have a part of our consciousness comes into the body and is here, but there's a larger part of our consciousness that remains on the other side. And when our body passes, we rejoin that, and we have this much bigger view and sense of the world. And it's a very beautiful, comforting journey. So that's one of my goals, is to help remove fear that people have of death, because actually the other side is wonderful, and I don't think it should be something we're afraid of.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us. Today our special guest is Laura Powers. She's amazing. She is a celebrity psychic. We're going to have so much fun. And I wanted to say thanks for being here. We met Laura when we were in LA. We were at a gallery and we struck up a conversation. We said, let's find out more information about your human journey. So thanks for being a part of us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here. We're here in Arizona. It's beautiful, amazing spiritual energy. So it's great to be able to have the opportunity to connect.
Laura, so you have psychic abilities. And when did this start?
So for me, it was always a part of my experience ever since I was little, but I could tell that other people weren't seeing and sensing what I did. So I actually started to think that I was crazy.
Leo really likes you. He's licking your toes.
Yes, I noticed that.
You must taste really good.
So I basically just, tried to ignore it as best as I could. I didn't talk about it. I feared that I was crazy. And then in college, a family friend described a ghost that I'd seen but never told anybody about. And he described the ghost in detail. So that was the point that I realized, okay, I'm not crazy. It's not just in my head. But I was pretty terrified, to be honest.
Wow.
I didn't really have the tools at that time in my life. I didn't know any teachers that were in my circle. And I did the only thing that I knew how to do, which was to try to block it out. And so I did very effectively for many years, just basically kind of like, I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, and blocked it out. But of course it was all still there. It was effectively like putting on a blindfold and pretending like everything that's behind the blindfold isn't there. It is there, and I just was in this state of denial, and I wasn't acknowledging what was there. And I wasn't also reacting and acting appropriately. So I wasn't getting messages I needed about people in my life. I was shut down in terms of my intuition, spirits as well. And so then I ended up in a really bad place in my life where I was in a toxic marriage. I was physically sick because when you block your spiritual energy, you know, you can get physical blockages as well. There's a huge connection. And so I just was a mess. And I actually went to a psychic just because I was lost and confused and, you know, didn't know what to do. And she said, you know, well, when you blocked that stuff out, you blocked out what you needed to know, which made sense. So I said about the process of psychically opening back up, started taking classes, learning to acknowledge and handle what was coming to me. And my life completely changed from there. I had an amazing angelic visitation experience. In fact, as soon as I said it, it's so funny. Are you guys familiar with the idea that your ears pop a lot of times when the angels come in?
I haven't heard that.
I did not hear that.
So literally I said angels and my ear popped kind of like when you're in an elevator or going up a mountain, because they have a different vibration, a different energy. So I said angels and I felt the energy of when I had that visitation and it was like pop. So if that ever happens to you, you're just sitting or something and you have your ears pop for no reason, it's very likely that an angel has come in.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll hear this. It's
They
really
can be a high pitch too,
Yeah,
for
I'll
sure.
hear that.
Yeah, that could be their communication to you, but the pop is like literally their energy just coming in. So yeah, when I had this angelic visitation, it was like I was in a pretty bad place in my life. I was in this bad marriage that I was trying to get out of. I was unemployed. I was physically ill. It was during the recession. So, you know, getting a job was not an easy thing to come by. I felt very trapped, but I suddenly felt surrounded by angels. I could hear them and feel them and the love that was, you know, encompassing me from them. And I just knew that everything was going to be okay. So I'm a huge advocate of angels, and they're a major resource that a lot of people just aren't aware of and don't think to call on.
Yeah.
So I just think of them as like, you know, unemployed, you know, and no one wants to not have a job when they want to do a job. So a lot of people are afraid to call on angels because they don't want to bother them or think it's too much. Like, no, they ain't, right? Think of like if you're unemployed, it sucks. You don't, frankly, you know, you don't want to be in that place. You want to be put to use. And that's what it is with angels when we're not calling on them.
Oh, wow. I like that a lot.
Yeah, right? So
You're keeping them unemployed.
Yeah, exactly. So really encourage it. And for me, that was literally a life-changing moment because I didn't understand that I needed to call on them to ask for their help, that because they honor free will, they will be there. They will always love us and guide us. But until we ask, they will do it, you know, not directly.
You know, that's the thing about the free will is you have to say, hey, I need some help. Hey, can I have this? And until you put yourself in a position of saying, this is something I desire to have, the universe is like, well, you got to ask, you know. I mean, yeah, things will show up in your life and there's synchronicities that occur. But I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. To receive, you got to ask. I need this thing.
Yeah, you have to ask and you have to do it repeatedly because we have free will, you know, you can change your mind and that's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, that's where I think this idea of prayer is in, you know, almost every culture really in one way or the other, to ask and to keep doing it regularly. And a lot of it is about developing a pattern and a mindset. And once you do that, it kind of becomes automatic. So I don't consciously ask the angels for as much help as I used to, but I was in such poor negative mind patterns before that I needed a lot of extra help when I first started working with
you're
them.
in a dark space.
Oh, I was. I mean,
you're sad, you're
literally,
depressed, nothing's
you know,
working in your life.
Absolutely. I was in this, you know, bad marriage. I was physically sick. I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am now. I was, you know, all these medications. I was on sleeping pills. I was unemployed. I you know, was confused. I didn't know what to do. So like every aspect of my life was kind of a mess. And I remember just thinking like, you know, okay, my body's kind of falling apart, and I guess that's what it's like to get older. You know? And things just kind of go to shit. I'm sorry, can we curse? I don't even know. Okay, all right. I'm not. I definitely will sometimes do that. But yeah, and then it was like as I changed my life and I learned to work with light and the angels and ask for help, you know, everything changed very dramatically. And it was like, oh no, that's not. It's not like I was on this. Well, this is the downward, you know, trajectory now. It was just I just didn't know how to change and shift all these things, and that's why I'm super passionate about helping people understand this, because whatever bad place you're in, it can get better. And it's changed very dramatically for me.
Well, what you reveal, you can heal. So you had to be, you had to give presence to something there. What was that process? I mean, you had to reach out to someone. You said you went to a psychic. Did you get some information?
There was a psychic that was in my hometown, which is Lafayette at the time. And I had been in contact with her through the community, so I knew about her. And yeah, she was very helpful for me. And the amazing thing now is with the internet, you don't have to have someone in your hometown. Like, it's amazing. This has opened things up. And I think if the internet had been around when I was a kid, it would have been very different. Also, media as a whole, people are educated, whether they're seeking it or not, through film, through television.
Yeah.
Well,
it gives a platform even for like a show like this, for podcasts, for video web series, and allows us to have more information. Yeah, more information than you would automatically be able to have from your circle directly. And then, people do phone sessions or, the Yellow Pages psychic.
Exactly. So that was really helpful for me. And then she gave me the courage to start taking classes. And once I learned to start to tap into this, I realized that I did have a real gift and ability. And the main issue why it was a problem for me when I was younger is I had all these abilities with no boundaries. I didn't know how to have spiritual or energetic boundaries and no training. So everything that flooded in was dark for most things.
It's like it's looking for a place to land type of thing.
Yeah. So the analogy that I give people is our minds, our lives, and our energy fields are very much like a garden, right? If you just inherit a patch of land, it's going to be full of weeds, or there's going to be weeds that are there, right? Yeah. And you have to cultivate that. You have to remove the weeds. You have to plant the flowers and the vegetables, or whatever it is that you want to grow. And then over time, it becomes easier to maintain. You just have to regularly weed it, but it's like more simple than in the beginning. So it was basically like I had a weedy garden, but I didn't know to plant the flowers. I didn't know about angels. I didn't know about all this stuff. And so it just was kind of unpleasant all the time. And then once I learned about this stuff, it was literally life-changing.
I think it's so important to understand that you need to decipher it, just like a language or learning how to write or anything, that it's there, but we don't know how to do those things.
Yeah, we're not taught.
It's not necessarily inherent to who we are. And so I find it also helpful just like making it a practice to ask simple questions, that when I'm not in such a need for the angels to come help, that I can really tune into just those simple things and seeing those simple answers come through and just kind of working it like that.
I think it's important to, know that it's a dialogue. So once you know about angels and spirit guides, and they're, the universe itself is constantly communicating with us through animals, through nature, through, numbers and coins and feathers and all these different things. But most people are just not paying attention. They don't know to look. So I really wish that as a part of our education system, or as a part of our culture, we would have this education about what I think of the spiritual ABCs. Right. I think, oh my gosh, how much easier would my life have been if I'd known this stuff when I was a child. But I'm still glad that I learned when I did, even if it was when I started when I was 30. It completely transformed everything. But yes, learning how we receive messages, and that we can ask for guidance, we can ask for support. And both of those things are very important, because when we ask for guidance, we are given messages constantly that then can dictate how we respond and can change things very dramatically. And then when we ask for help, it gives them permission to intervene and shift things that are not in our control.
Guidance versus help. I never thought about that. That's two different energies.
Two different things. And you really need
One's
both.
Real desperate. Oh my God. One's like, hey, I need a little bit of help. Guidance.
Yeah. And they go hand in hand, because you can ask for help, and then as a part of that, the angels will go in and the universe will start to kind of respond accordingly, but they will also give you messages in effect to answer your own prayer. So, okay, read this book, or go to this place, or call this person, or whatever. So these kind of intuitive urges, and all of those are to support us in whatever it is that is for our highest purpose and what we've asked for, if it's for her purpose, right?
Well, I love that, because we see the repeating number, the synchronicity. We see that we had a conversation and we're in a bookstore and that book jumps off the shelf and it's like, ugh. So I think it's like when you tune into it, it starts to continually build and come to you.
Absolutely. And whenever there is a channel or avenue that is working, our angels and spirit guides will use it even more. So they're constantly doing it, but I've literally gotten the message that for every time we get a message, they've tried to send it to us 100 times. Literally. But there's so much going on. Most people don't know to pay attention.
Hello.
Yeah. But then if you start to pay attention to things, they're like, oh, do that more. Like it's working, right? So, messages in music, numbers, finding feathers, overheard conversations. These are all ways that, we will be relayed messages.
And numbers have been a big one to me.
They're huge for me too.
I look over and it's like 555. I'm like, okay, change is coming. That's what we're doing. We're looking for a new place. Okay, change is coming.
Totally.
Just those things. And it's sort of like I can put together on the road 333 777 and almost put the message together.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And then also how the number will shift. I don't have it anymore, but for a period of time I had one of those like iPod docking stations, and I called it my angel clock because the digital display broke and numbers would just flash.
Oh wow.
And I swear it was like whatever number you needed, I called it my angel clock. And, and I would host like a class or something and be like, go check out the angel clock in the bathroom, because it was like, okay. And the numbers were going to be different for different people or maybe a different part of the day, whatever your thought patterns were, whatever.
Fun.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Awesome. So you had this angel experience, this angel awakening. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So it was when I was still with my ex-husband. I was living in Seattle at the time, knew that I needed to get out of the marriage, was unemployed, didn't know what I was going to do. I was literally like, what do I do? I don't have a job. I need to get out of this marriage. Where do I live? What do I do?
Yeah.
Like everything was just, I just had no idea.
I don't want to live in a cardboard box.
Right. And so I had a lot of decisions I needed to make. Didn't really feel supported.
That's the worst.
Felt very lost and confused. And literally, I was also physically sick, and so just was in that space and had taken a nap, and it was in that in-between sleep and dream state, which is when we're often the most psychically open and aware. Yeah, so a lot of visitations will happen during that time. And I just felt completely surrounded by angels. I could feel their vibration and energy. And not only that, I could hear their wing beats. And it was fascinating. It sounded like thousands of wings and it was literally this hum, that I could feel. And it was one of those things that seemed to stretch on for so long. I don't know exactly how long it lasted, but it just felt like it just kept happening and happening, but in a really beautiful way. And I felt so much love and support. And I knew after that no matter what happened, it was going to be okay. So even though after that experience, my situation was exactly the same as it had been prior to that experience, I had a completely different mindset. I knew that they were there, which I'd seen angel lights and things like that, but just not had that level of, interaction, conscious interaction with angels prior to that. And it gave me the courage to start paying attention, asking for guidance, and listen. So, for example, one of the things that I was guided to do was to go travel in Europe. And
fun.
Yeah, it was great, but I had no money, right?
Bummer.
Which is why it was like,
to me, that sounds like fun, because it's like, okay, now where's it going to come
from? What's the adventure?
Well, that was part of it. It's like learning to trust, and I did trust them, but learning and practicing that trust. Yeah. So I decided to take a class to get my TEFL certificate teaching English as a foreign language, and I later went to China to teach, but I did my certificate in Spain, in Barcelona. And I made this plan and arrangement and had some friends that were traveling afterwards, and got the message to travel with them. Yeah, except I only had like $500. So I literally just went there with $500 for like 4 weeks.
How fun.
Yeah. And sure enough, I got an unexpected sum of money while I was out there. But if I hadn't gone when I was planning, I don't think that things would unfold in the way that they were suggesting that was really good for me. Yeah. So after that, it became easier for me to trust that, because did take this kind of leap of faith, and it worked out well.
Oh, that's so good.
And then I'm a lot more trusting, and I as a result of that, I do things pretty constantly that I think a lot of people have difficulty with, because I'm like, I trust
Yeah.
their guidance that
That's-
even if I don't know why, there is a reason. And even if I can't imagine how this will be supported.
That's part of the journey, is that faith. You have to have
It's
that
huge.
faith that it's going to work out. And if you will, trust that the universe is going to support you. And if you
Yeah.
come into that space where you're, skeptical about everything and you don't, and you're always in that
You
lower
block it.
vibration, you block it. Yeah.
You do.
So you let it flow. And it's just that moving in that space. We've had so many synchronistic things. We're like, well, let's just do this thing and see what happens. And we
Yeah.
meet this person and this experience occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether it's a financial thing or just an experiential thing, you have to put yourself into a place of being able to trust and have faith that it's going to work out.
Right.
Yeah.
And, our angels and spirit guides have the bigger picture that we don't have. So,
Yeah.
they, I'm sure, knew that I was going to get that money, even though I consciously didn't know it yet.
They're like, "Come on,
The
come on."
circumstances
Yeah.
haven't presented themselves. And it's funny because now all these things happen. I'm like, wow, even just recently, I had a whole extended weekend on my calendar that didn't have anything on it, which is really rare. I typically book out in advance, and I was like, something is being reserved for that. And so I just okay, I'm just waiting, and I trust that whatever. And sure enough, 2 days before, I got invited to Coachella, and I got, a ticket and a ride and a place to stay,
How
all
fun.
this given to me. And it was amazing. It was this incredible experience. And I think in addition to the fun, there were some professional and spiritual reasons for me to be there. But,
It was more than
Yeah.
just the feathers and glow sticks.
yeah, exactly. I mean, even though that's great, all the fun is important. But yeah, so I just go with that, and I trust it a lot more than I would have when I was younger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful space, especially when you're traveling. We interviewed Lisa Haisha, and she said she loves to go someplace, get her ticket, and then not have reservations because she just figures out where spirit leads her, and she meets her soul tribe. She talks about you just meet people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, if you can learn to navigate, I mean, magic literally happens. So I'll tell a story because I think people would appreciate it. So I got the message to be in Los Angeles for the Oscars this year.
Oh wow!
And I didn't have any invitations to parties. And at the end of Oscar night, I was literally having a private concert sitting next to Jamie Foxx, him playing on the piano.
Wow.
So it's, just paying attention. And I have a little selfie video. It was me and about a dozen people. And he sat down, and I'd been talking with him and had asked him to sign the piano that was owned by the man who owns the piano that was using it for the venue. And he literally went like this, and I sat down next to him and selfie video for 20 minutes. Keep in mind, I had no invitations to parties, and I went to 2 big parties, and ended up hanging out with Jamie Foxx. And not that this is about being celebrity splashy, but it was literally a magical evening.
It
All of
felt
us
fun.
were talking about how it was so memorable and so special. And, we just followed, and I'm good at, and with my friend, I'm like, hey, come, let's do this, and just follow that magic line.
Yeah.
That is the bliss you get into when you realize life isn't a test and you got to get through, and life is about play. It's about fun. And when you get into that vibration, that lightness, you can play. And then you get these experiences where you go, that was amazing. I can't wait till the next time something happens.
Absolutely. And I think so much of this is about releasing messages that we have, that it has to be tough, and paying attention to the guidance we have to make it, fun and magical.
Yeah.
And a lot of, especially since this is so for healers and kind of light workers, I feel like there's a lot of people doing this work that are still, carrying the martyr burden on the martyr path, and that I have to suffer in order to help and to heal and to teach. And it's just not true. But it can be challenging to let it go. But when you do, that's when the magic really does happen, even at a higher level.
Yeah. I call it my ease and flow state.
Yeah.
When you're just in that ease and flow, and you just go.
Yeah.
And then when you're not in that, then you're you're off path, because it should all flow like that. Even if it's hard, it should still flow.
Well, I think a lot of the hard part has to do with clearing our blocks. So our beliefs that aren't aligned, or resistance that we have to something.
Oh yeah.
That's the hard work. But then that also, I think, gets easier the more that you do it. and the manifesting piece too. Like I feel like manifesting is like a muscle.
It is.
And you get stronger manifesting muscles as you go. So now I can manifest things that would have been very difficult for me to manifest 5 years ago.
That segue of beliefs is really important to me, because I was given a certain belief system said that you got to try to get out of here to get to there, try to get to heaven.
Sure.
That heaven hell thing, if you missed it, something bad was going to happen. I was given the angels were the good guys, the demons were the bad guys, and there was a war, and there's all this. It's very tribal. It's very Bronze Age technology. And as I continue to grow and understand more about spirituality, I'm understanding about the spirit guides and the angels and how you're directed and guided. What were some of those religious beliefs that you were given as a kid? You know, were you given a system or a narrative to say this is the way it is, and you had to try to break free from?
So my mother was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school and everything, but she was already somewhat disenfranchised with it by the time my sister and I were born. And so she raised us with the teachings, but also kind of like gave us permission to either accept it or not. It wasn't like, this is how it is. It was like, here's what I was taught.
Yeah,
and
I was taught this.
And we went to church, but then I think it was around when I was in middle school, it was like, if you want to keep going, you can, but we don't have to. And I actually, at that point, it was actually in high school, started going to Bible study just more out of curiosity.
Oh, wow.
So I felt the need to just kind of delve into some of this stuff. And I was very, I would say argumentative at times with some of the texts, but it was just part of my learning and growing experience. So I appreciate that I was given the context of some of this stuff, but like not that this is the way that it is. And so now I describe myself as spiritual. And I do think that a lot of religions have, pieces that I think are very helpful, but there is no religion that I feel like is comprehensive enough to, fully follow. For example, I love Jesus. I just think a lot of the teachings of the religion of Catholicism or Christianity are too rigid for me, and I don't feel like encompass the whole picture. Also, in my work as a psychic, I see lots of beings from different dimensions and planets, so extraterrestrials and things. Absolutely. So
tell me more.
Most religions are not getting into any of that. Again, most religions are very human centric.
It's Earth mythology.
It's Earth and it's human centric.
If Jesus died for your sins, well, what about the other planet when there's this intergalactic connection? What about them? Oh, that'll pose a problem for the Earth religion.
And even from the Earth perspective, it's human centric, not addressing animals, other humanoids that I believe are here. So it's just I would say a more limited perspective than what I feel like is accurate for what I sense as a psychic. But at the same time, I don't expect other people to believe what I believe because they don't perceive the world the way that I do. They don't have the visions and see the things that I see. So I try to be respectful of whatever people believe and what their experience is.
Well, we're all in different stages of the journey too. And that's a big, important process when you learn that some people are just like, oh, I just learned my alphabet. And you're like, oh, well, I went to colors next. And then I learned how to do fractions, in this journey that we're on.
Yes. Absolutely. There's, people on all levels of soul development. And that's a really important thing. We were talking a little bit about that in terms of books that we'd read. And it is really important because you can't automatically tell by looking at someone where they are. And I think what happens with a lot of, especially healers and teachers, is they're trying to teach at a level that's inappropriate for the students.
Oh, that's really good. Give presence to some examples of that.
If you're dealing with a young soul and they're literally not able to or wanting to talk about some of these things. So a lot of very young souls, for example, just aren't going to be focused on spirituality. It's would be like, trying to have a conversation about astrophysics or something with a 2-year-old.
Or with me, right?
Yeah. But, just to give comparison. And so that's the challenge too, is you could have an older human, someone who's an older age, but, they're still learning some of the more early lessons in terms of spiritual development. For example, not to, killing people isn't a solution, that kind of thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I look at a lot of the places where there's major physical conflict, and a lot of that is very young souls that are having their experience that they need to learn. So, like toddlers are very violent and aggressive. They're not a bad person. They're just still learning.
Just learning how to be an ego and to be other, and I want mine.
Absolutely.
One of the biggest influences in my life has been Journey of Souls, Dr. Michael Newton.
Yeah, that's the book I was thinking of.
He talks about how you chose your body, you chose your birthday, you chose your family, they chose you. It's not random happenstance. It's very organized. And then your guides are there to help guide and give you direction through your life. And he specifically talked about the journey of evolution of the soul, and how, however it works, souls are come off of source and somehow individuate.
Yeah,
and
births of souls happen.
How we are all these individual expressions of the divine. And as we go through our soul evolution to expand consciousness, we'll have different levels, and he even assigns colors to them with an aura. Do you have any experience in kind of giving some language around that you've experienced?
I mean, I have read that book and some other books that go over similar topics, and I do agree with that and feel that there's resonance. I do believe that souls are born, and so yes, there are. It's not the right word really to say young or old, because that's kind of like human time, but at the same, there are less developed, I guess, newer.
Yeah, no, he specifically said there is a young versus a more mature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that to be the case. And I do think that Earth as a planet is a place where people come to do a lot of like really tough learning.
Yeah,
and
that's what it feels like to us.
Yeah, yeah. Right. And there's certainly not everyone here is having that, but it is. Yeah, it's not an easy planet for incarnation.
I think the thing that's not easy about it is you have this sense of isolation, where in that other realm, it's such a sense of oneness, and so when you come here, it just feels so isolated.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges of incarnation as a whole. And then as we get kind of older, more developed as souls, we start to feel that more, the connection. So I think, if you're empathic or you have these abilities, that is a part of you, basically you realizing, oh, I'm not really separate. Like this is, I'm feeling what's other, except it's not, it is and it isn't. And so, when people are like, kind of shut down, they just may not be ready to experience that yet.
Yeah.
Part of your experience for being a celebrity psychic is actually talking with celebrities, whether they're living or they're dead. Give presence to some of the work that you've done. Yeah,
so it was a really interesting thing. Like when I started to open up the channel and see who showed up. Now, I will say, even before I thought of myself as a psychic, that there were spirits that would show up for me. Like Marilyn Monroe showed up for me when I was an adolescent.
Oh.
And I say Marilyn Monroe, but it was really, the Norma Jean side, not the flashy. And I feel like we have a soul connection, and that she was a guide for me and very much tried to help me. And it was interesting because it always felt like she was trying to help me avoid some of the things that she struggled with, or help me so it wasn't so bad for me. And I do think she and I have a lot of the similar kind of soul lessons and struggles that we're going with. So from the beginning, I was like, wow, what is that? I don't know. It was just like, oh, there's Marilyn Monroe. Huh, that's weird,
Wow.
And then
how did you feel that? I mean, you had to have been aware, or were you aware?
I mean, I was totally aware of it. And I just knew that I felt her, and I didn't really understand why, but I felt like she was trying to share a message with me, and she was trying to help me. And it was felt like a very authentic, personal thing. I think I may have told my mother, but it wasn't something I talked about a lot. It was just, something meaningful that I experienced. And then as I got training, and I started to learn to channel and open the messages, when I would open up just to see who was there, I mean, it would be celebrities. It wouldn't be, necessarily someone I knew. It was almost always celebrities. And so I think there's two reasons for that. One is that, when a person dies, they from the other side are still frequently trying to get their messages across.
And now that they've learned some cool things.
Yeah, they're still,
I figured this thing out.
Yeah, they're learning, their sharing doesn't stop, right? They keep wanting to do that, even from the other side. And I had a willingness and an openness to share what I was getting. So a lot of people have these abilities, but they're afraid to talk about it. They're afraid to share with the world. And as soon as I realized I needed to do this, I started right away just being public. I call it the sort of, spiritual coming out of the closet.
Oh,
And I think there has
you're putting yourself out there
it can be scary.
like, you're kind of like, I don't know, are you kind of crazy?
Yeah.
Right? Because people don't get it sometimes. So it's a scary thing to do.
It can be scary because of, like what you said, perception or judgment, but also a lot of us who have this have literally been persecuted in past lives. So I've been burned as a witch before, and we've had times when we suffered for doing this, but it was, in a soul lesson, it was usually because we were trying to teach or share in a way that wasn't appropriate for
the time
or the audience. But that has shifts as well. So like now we're in a time and place where it is safe for me to do this. In fact, people pay me, to do it. So coming and working through that fear. And then once I acknowledged it, I was like, and then I was ready. And I've been working through varying levels of, fear of visibility. But from the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm going to acknowledge this and I'm going to do it. So the spirits that want to share a message, they come to me. And I think the other piece of it is that, we don't always know who we were before and who our soul connections are. So I think many of these spirits I know on a soul level, even though in this body, I never knew them. We know each other on a soul level. Yeah. And so they were like, hey, Yen, I have a message for you. Right. And then now I've started to work with, celebrities that are still in body. So that's been really fun as well.
Tell me about some of that process.
Yeah.
I mean, how people find you, they reach out to you?
Yeah. And I think some of this is a part of, I've always felt like once I came to acknowledge my work in this area, that was a part of my path and purpose to help make some of this more mainstream and accessible and not as like scary kind of, woo-woo or whatever that people think. And so I've had opportunities. So recently, for example, I was interviewed by Will Ferrell.
Oh, fun.
For his podcast. And I love it because it's a comedy podcast. It's him as Ron Burgundy from The Anchorman.
God, I love that.
So much fun.
We just rewatched that.
Yeah, we just rewatched that not so
long
long
ago. Yeah, it's great. And, that people will be entertained. That's why they're going for that. But they'll also learn about the psychic realm through the questions that he's asking me. So things like that have started to come up. And then I do work with celebrities as clients as well. And a lot of that is word of mouth, just people hearing about me.
Are you able to give some information evidentially where they're just like, oh my God? I mean, does that come up?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have the experience frequently where people are kind of so surprised. I had several experiences early on that were just very striking. I'll give one story. So I had a woman and her husband come in and they just asked me to do mediumship, and they told me, the name of the spirit that they wanted me to connect with and just the relationship. And I could tell that the husband was very skeptical, like from the beginning, just body language and just everything. I could just tell he was kind of along for the ride, but, wasn't that interested or believing. And from the beginning, I opened up the channel and the spirit, all he would do was this. He wasn't saying anything. He just kept doing this. And so I finally just turned to them and I said, he just keeps doing this. And, that's all he's doing. I can't tell you anything else because that's all he's showing me. And she burst into tears and explained to me that at the end of his life, she had taken care of him and he had had his vocal cords paralyzed. So this is thank you in sign language, which I didn't know any of that, right? At least not on a conscious level. And then her husband was like, okay, she's real. Because it was just so weird and specific. And, then after that, we were able to, he opened up, but he knew that he needed to do that for them to know that it was legitimate, that I was really doing this. And I've had a lot of other examples. Once I was doing readings for a party, and one of the guest was like not participating, but she kept hearing about everyone else's readings. And then she did it. And then I was talking with her grandfather and she kept like saying, how do you know that? How do you know that? Like I was like doing some kind of trick or something, because I'm like, I don't, but I mean, he's telling me, so I guess I know it now, but So these kinds of things happen frequently. And then the other thing is that sometimes it takes a time for these things. So if I'm communicating with the spirit, even then it might take time. One time I was like, your grandfather shows me fishing, and she was like, I don't know. And then, she went home and talked to her sister, and he was like, oh, he loved to fish, but she didn't know that,
Oh, wow.
So it might be even not then at the moment, a little bit later that it comes forward that there's some resonance, or sometimes I'll see something and I'll share it, and it might take years for it to happen. So I've had those emails or calls where, Laura, you wouldn't believe you told me this several years ago. Well, this just happened or whatever. So I've learned not to get wrapped up in people's reaction, but it is great when people have this like kind of aha, amazing moment.
That feels fun when you find that thing, you tap into the gold mine. And
it's always rewarding and help. I mean, my goal is ultimately to help people. So if I can see that be immediately effective, it's great. But I've also learned that it will happen in the timeline, and I have to trust that if something is being shared with me, to share with them that there is a reason for it, even if I don't understand what it is at that moment.
Was that hard to tackle at first? Like,
oh, totally.
When you didn't have that validation in the moment?
Even being very clairvoyant. I mean, and this was a challenge for me growing up, because sometimes I had a hard time telling if someone was alive or not. Oh. Like literally, I one time called the cops on a ghost, and it was super embarrassing. Thought there was an intruder in the house, things like that.
Wow.
So I'm very clairvoyant. I had that from the beginning, but it was interesting how when I was trying to use it, it was a lot of times not coming forward in the way, or wasn't as clear. So I had to learn that even when it was like subtle, to trust it. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge for people that have abilities is when they're trying to use it, to just go with what they're getting and trust it. Because the biggest thing is you get something and you like dismiss it. I teach psychic development, and one time I was teaching a class and we were doing mediumship, and people will say this constantly when they're learning, well, I didn't get much or anything. And sometimes I'll have to like do a little, did you feel anything? Did you hear anything? Just a sense of whatever. And my mom, as an example, is profoundly psychic, but she was one of those people that like never really thought she was. And she took several of my classes, and one time we were doing mediumship, and she was like, well, I didn't get much. And it's like, pulling, come on, what'd you get? Yeah. And she's like, well, I heard a loud bang. And it turned out that the spirit we were communicating with was a police officer who had been shot in the line of duty. And that's how she died, was being shot.
Wow.
So I'm like, just whatever you get when you're learning, people tend to dismiss it because they don't understand it. Yeah. When instead they should be, okay, what is that asking? Like, well, what does that mean? Why is that being presented to me?
Yeah, I was in a workshop like that one time, and she's like, okay, I'm going to put an energy in the center of the room and just tell me the first thing that comes to you. And I kept seeing a picture of a mouse, and it just kept coming and kept coming. And then she's going around the room, and everybody's saying they saw a dog, they saw this, they saw that. And I'm like, no. And I feel like I'm just totally off base, because there's two or three people are saying a dog. And she comes to it, she goes, it was Mickey Mouse. And I was like, I was right. But I was too afraid to say anything.
We question it. Yeah. And that's why I love teaching group classes, especially because sometimes, people will get the same thing, and it helps just clarify and give you affirmation. Yeah. That it's even from the teacher, but even if several people in the class will get the same thing.
But it wasn't like everybody's getting, so I was so probably afraid to say something.
What they were saying is like maybe seeing like a general shape.
Yeah. Or the ears, or,
Yeah.
You also get that connectivity with the animal kingdom too. Give presence to that. Talk a little bit about how that works for you.
Yeah, so animals are incarnated souls, just like humans are, and they have their own life purposes and lessons as well. And then there's, some souls that tend to incarnate more as animals, and some that tend to incarnate more as humans. And there's some that kind of do a mix of both. So I definitely get the sense that frequently a lot of animals are more animals and humans are more animals, but there's crossover. Like I've been a cat a bunch of times. I've also been a horse and a dog. Yeah. And I'm at this point, I can like recall past lives, and I can, pull up kind of themes that will. So let's say if I have tough interaction with someone, I'm like, oh, let me look at the lives, with that person, or in a situation that relates to that. So a lot of animals that have very human-like traits have been humans before. So, I mean, we have all seen or interacted with, dogs, for example, that are like a person, more so than other dogs.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of times they have been, they have been a man or a woman or whatever a bunch of times.
Interesting. Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense.
We've had the family pet that were like, yeah, you don't act like normal dogs. You're just you just have this something sense about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the sort of perspective and consciousness of wild animals is different than domesticated animals for the most part too. They are a lot more kind of tapped in with the universal kind of nature energy, less more in their like solo consciousness. They're definitely more connected and aware, I would say, than most domesticated animals.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I mean, it is interesting when I do animal readings because it's one of my favorite things to do because a lot of times it's very much for the human. Like there's almost always major messages for the human that the animal is relaying, and their life, purposes and missions often connect with the human that they're connected with.
Do you ever have animals that just are like, no, I need to get this message across to my human, and they like are approaching you because they know you can get it out?
Well, I have pretty strong boundaries with my work. I have to, otherwise I could get drained. So I've set that parameter with my guides that it's coming in either as a client or, through media or something. And so it doesn't usually come in that way, like walking through the store or whatever, It's like it comes in. I've said, like, I've kind of set the parameters. It needs to come in, through these channels. But I've certainly had animals communicate with me, like, really, loudly. In fact, there was one time I actually wrote about this in one of my books. I think it was Diary of a Psychic. But so I did some what I call like pro bono clearing work at the Sand Creek Massacre site. So for those who aren't familiar, the Sand Creek Massacre site is a really Native American slaughter that happened in northeastern Colorado. It was when Abraham Lincoln was president, and it was before Colorado was even a state. It was a territory at that point. And Abraham had agreed for several Native American tribes that they would be safe if they stayed in this, part of the land and that they weren't aggressive. Well, this colonel in Colorado took it upon himself to like go and do an attack, and he did. So at any rate, we had gone there, and I helped a lot of spirits cross over, and we're driving home, and it's like in the December in Colorado, really cold. And we're driving through this country road, and this cow like basically yells at me. Yeah. And it was probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 degrees. I mean, it was really cold. And I think it was actually a sheep, but it's like, hey. And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, hey, we get colds. We have feelings.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I know, I'm sorry. I mean, I think a lot of people seem, especially animals that are, for food, that they're unfeeling or they don't sense things. And that isn't the case. So I just said, I know, I'm sorry. I'll try to get the word out like I am doing right now that, these animals do, have emotions and feelings and sensations. And it does really bother me how we treat animals, in this country, that as if they're unfeeling creatures.
You've got a prolific amount of writing that you've done. Talk about your writing and some of the books that you've released and some of the things that come up for you as you're crafting this journey and your humanness. Yeah,
so I felt from the beginning the need to teach and share and write, and I think writing is a great way to educate. I knew pretty early on that there was not going to be possible to do my mission kind of one-on-one, right? That there's just only one of me, and there's just not enough time. And so writing was such a great way to share information in like a comprehensive way. So I have 7 books on, angels, the other side, psychic stuff, the supernatural. And then my next book that I'll be most likely releasing is on my work with animals. So we dive deep into the sort of spiritual principle with animals, animal mediumship, as well as, pet psychic work. And then the book is actually includes transcriptions of different animal readings, which is really interesting because I think it provides such insight to like literally, hear examples of, situations with animals and humans and their past lives and what they're working on their humans with and everything.
Nice.
So you think there's like a soul contract with animals and humans, like Leo the pug to be our dog?
I totally think so.
Yeah.
Because
He's off camera snoring right now.
The way that guy came across our path was just like, he like injected himself into our life.
Yeah, I would say it can be a contract. It's not necessarily a contract, but certainly there can be agreements between souls that, and closeness between souls that they will help each other with these things. But yeah, just like, it's believed that we choose our parents and our children, and I agree with that on a soul level. I think the same thing is with animals, that it's not just an accident like these things are. Chosen and in many cases planned in advance. Although sometimes we make choices which change whatever the plan is, and then alternate arrangements are made.
Give some presence to where you think you were before, where you think you are now, and what you think the arc of your soul journey is.
That is a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Yeah, I've had a lot of past lives. In fact, I remember, bits and pieces from a lot of different lives.
You remember them? With
Yeah.
this brain, you remember them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting because sometimes I'll be hanging out with someone and then I'll have this like flash all of a sudden. It's like all this stuff is revealed.
I just had a thing. I don't think it's the brain. It's a psychic spiritual thing.
Yeah.
I just want to give presence to that.
Yeah, no, completely. So yeah, I've been a lot of different people, Chinese rice farmer, I've been royalty, I've been, all different things,
You can
all
feel
different
those
levels.
energies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I honestly have been a man a lot more than a woman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that's something I think I was aware of, in a way, even though I don't think I would have consciously understood it the way that I do now. A lot of my exes describe me as being like a man in terms of personality. And I think part of it is I'm like, okay, let's try this female form on. Let's try to be in this other way.
Well, you carry it well.
Oh, thank you. I've learned how to.
I mean, you can wear high heels. I'd be like this.
Yeah. I think of my form in this life as like a lifetime costume. Like I knew from the beginning that this is what I needed to do what I'm supposed to do. Kind of like acting. Like this is what I need for this job that I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And being, looking like this and being female and even eye color and hair color. I think all that was, chosen for a reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when I dream sometimes I'm a man, I definitely, I would be very comfortable as a man.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't freak me out, although in dating it certainly can freak someone out.
It might not be the first topic you want to bring up,
No,
right?
well, but on the other hand, I'm like, this is me. If you're not comfortable with that, then we probably shouldn't be. Yeah.
Get it right out of the way.
Yeah.
How fun.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I have a lot of awareness, and it's funny how the universe will bring you like to places that have relevance for you. So as an example, Egypt is a place where I know is really significant for me for various lifetimes. And my undergrad's in theater, and I think that I needed to go to Egypt. And so I went on a business trip to Cairo, which is like so ridiculous for theater.
Oh,
wow. I mean,
Wow.
that's not a normal thing, Yeah. But I was working on a production of Grease the musical in Cairo.
cool.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Tell me
Yeah.
more.
But, so a lot of times we're drawn and doors of opportunity will open up when there are places that, we need to reconnect with for whatever reason. Also, I went and lived in China.
Yeah. You were
I had
teaching there.
past lives there for sure as well.
Wow.
So when that comes up to you, like you have that past life experience, what is that like? Because I have a feeling that everybody gets that, but they don't know what that is.
That is probably true. Well, first of all, you will maybe have a fascination or feel drawn to certain places or times in history. So for me, like ancient Egypt, like I literally had a picture of Nefertiti in my room when I was like 7. Like that's not a normal thing. It's just not. It was ever since I was really little, really fascinated.
And your favorite song was "Walk Like an Egyptian."
I loved it. Actually came out when I was a kid, and I was like, dude, I loved it. I was Cleopatra when I was, 7 or 8 for
Oh,
Halloween.
wow.
So things like that, just a resonance of pull, familiarity. I mean, there are lots of stories of people even like knowing languages or knowing things that they should know, literally having memories. And with little kids, a lot of times they can't even differentiate that it's not from this lifetime. It just like is still there somehow. But in my case now as a psychic, I literally will usually get like a flash and literally see images.
Like a video type of
like
exactly.
it's
a movie's
replaying.
playing.
Yeah. And it's almost like a highlight reel or something of,
Nice.
the different things that are relevant. And usually it's something in this life that's triggering it. Like one time I was traveling in New Orleans, and I was connecting with a man that I had been involved with not in New Orleans. So we just both happened to be there, and we were meeting, and we're walking down the road. I think we were on Canal Street, and I got a flash of that, we had been romantically together in New Orleans in another lifetime. Because it was all very strange how we just were there at the same time, and the patterns were being shown to me because those patterns were replaying in this lifetime, and it was for me to see and understand those past life dynamics, to see the current situation more clearly.
Yeah. Wow. Gail had an experience in Italy.
I did. So I did a past life regression, and I could remember the scenery of the place I was in, and then several months later, I went to Italy, and we were touring this little village, and I look up, and it was like the spot that I had seen in the past life regression.
Wow.
And it just freaked me out because I started looking around and started recognizing all kinds of stuff. And I'd never been there. I'd never seen this town.
Right.
You know, I first time I'd ever been to Italy. So it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. It can happen like that where you see in advance, or you can go to a place and then suddenly it's like, oh, I've been here. I had that when I was in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And I literally walked in, and it was like this weird, not like deja vu, like, oh, but it was like, whoa, like I could feel like having done that before in a different time. Very, like the way the light was coming, like everything, it was just really incredible. So it could be just like a little sense like that, or it could be like a full blown, like I'm seeing all these scenes. Yeah. Whatever we need is what we're presented.
And how about other realms, angelic realms or ET realms or anything like that? Do you get any sensation from those?
Yeah, I definitely believe in quantum physics. So I think this is, one planet in one dimension. So there are lots of extraterrestrial beings. And so that means extraterrestrial is, from this plane, but in a different geographical place. And I think a lot of times people confuse those extra, like planetary beings with those that are from different dimensions, so extra dimensional.
Yes, that is a really good question. Gail and I have been trying to figure this out. So like, okay, we're in this 3D, but then there's the spiritual realm, and how do the ET and the other interdimensional things fit in? For
a lot of people, I think they just kind of lump it all together, or they just assume something is extraterrestrial, and really it may be from a different dimension altogether. So it's actually incredibly complex. And we were chit-chatting a little bit before then, the show, that, I do not ever assume that just because someone looks like a human that they are, because there's lots of extraterrestrial and extra dimensional beings that kind of mix with us that are not.
Wow.
Either from this plane or from this planet.
So do you can usually key into if somebody, or if an ET is in a human form?
I don't know that I could say that I usually can. But I certainly can sometimes tell that something is not something is not. And I've had many of those experiences, like not a human. Absolutely. Yeah.
Your ET dar goes off, huh?
Yeah. And sometimes it's just like, I can feel that they are not human. And sometimes there's even behavioral things where it's like, yeah, that's not a normal human behavior. I mean, I had one experience in Hollywood. First of all, these two men were very tall, like 6'7", And
they were Palladians.
Yeah. I don't know what they were, but we're in this nightclub, and like I'm leaning against the bottle service area, and he comes up, and like it's not even that crowded, and he literally like leans his back against me, and then I mentally said back off, like psychically, and then he did, And then I walked to the bathroom just to get away because it was so weird. And they followed me. Like, this is not, a normal thing that most humans would do. But they literally, I felt no empathy. Like, there was no that human emotion. It was just like, they weren't a robot. They definitely had, matter that was organic. But they did not have any of that kind of human soul thing, feeling, emotion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they feel reptilian?
No, that is the thing. But
we just went to a conference and they talked a lot about the reptilian and stuff. And I was like, oh.
I think, one of the things I want to share is there are a lot of different beings here, but I think it's really important not to get wrapped up in fear and kind of paranoia about this stuff. And also that generally with extraterrestrials, I feel like it's kind of like, hey, they're the range of light and dark, just like humans are.
Yeah. Have you known good humans? Yep. You know bad humans? Yep.
Exactly. So it's just not to get in like a lot of fear and terror about it. Have boundaries. If something doesn't feel right, obviously trust that. But it's important not to just get so wrapped up in that you're living in fear, and then you will attract that stuff.
That's a really good point. Give some presents that people can really give some tangibility to, with that intuition that people have, and that psychic ability, that little radar that we all kind of have to hone in on something. Everybody has that little bit of a sense. They just haven't worked that muscle. Give some presents to that for folks that are like feeling these energies.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's there, and even if you don't understand why, that there's something to it. I think it's definitely like a muscle, like we talked about manifesting being a muscle, but learning to trust and use your intuitive or psychic abilities is definitely something that builds over time. And I really encourage everyone to do it because it's such a powerful tool for changing your life, for sensing when things are safe or not safe. And I mean, I've had so many experiences where whatever the physical seems to be, the actual opposite is true. Meaning it looks safe, but it's not. Or it looks unsafe, but it is, Okay. And by accessing and connecting with your own intuition, you can get out of that, kind of amygdala side of the brain, that fear-based triggered side, and, navigate in a way that is more true to what's really going on.
That's really good.
That's good.
And you talked about playing big instead of playing small. Give presence to that for folks. Yeah,
I think, we are constantly, from the time we're really little, taught how kind of powerless and small we are. And the truth is, honestly, size has nothing to do with your capability in any way. I mean, look at an atomic bomb, right? The smallest thing makes the biggest explosion, right? Yeah. And that goes that way from either destructiveness or, something that's creating, positive change as well. So it's important to just remember that you have an infinite ability, really, to be impactful. And you hear stories about this all the time. The other day I heard a story and it made me smile so much. It's this little boy who, he went to this cafe. It was one of the big clothing chains that has a cafe in it. And they had plastic straws, and he was 7. And he wrote a letter to the CEO asking for them not to have plastic straws for sea turtles.
Yeah.
Good.
And the CEO responded, they've now banned plastic straws. That we all have such an incredible ability to impact the world, have a better life. And I really do believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. The better each of us is, the better we are collectively. And people just kind of tend to forget that with societal messaging. And if you're around a lot of people that have the crab mentality, you feel like guys familiar with that?
Yeah, pulling them back.
Yeah, you try to get out of the crab pail and the other crabs, that may be a sign of having better boundaries and releasing some of those people or situations. And also sometimes people just need something modeled for them, and once you change, it allows them to change as well. So I think we're all incredibly powerful, and we don't even really know what is possible. And I think sometimes just what is possible is so frightening in a way, because we have been taught it so small that it's like it creates this cognitive dissonance of like, what I've been told and what I'm feeling is not resonant, and one of these must be wrong, so I'll just trust that I'm powerless. That's what I've been told. So trust what you feel, and know that it's possible. And I think once you step into that, it opens for magic and really amazing experiences.
So good. Give presence to your website and how people can get a hold of you and connect, and the resources that you have to offer.
Sure. So my website, in terms of like the spiritual and psychic work, is healingpowers.net. And on there, I have a blog. I have my podcast, Healing Powers Podcast, where I also do interviews. And it's fun because I've been podcasting for 8 years. So you can really listen to like the very beginning. Nice. When I started podcasting, I wasn't even working as a psychic yet. I was just at the very beginning. And so I think it's really fascinating, to be able to have that whole history there.
You see yourself matriculate in your evolution.
Yeah. And I do, charge for my services, and I know a lot of people, it's out of their budget, but I've always wanted to have something for everyone. So I have my blog, my podcasts, obviously those are free. And then my books are very low cost, and those are linked on my website or on Amazon. If you just search like Laura Powers and Angels, it'll pop up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Talk about your podcast and the things that you're doing and the type of guests that you're having on there.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Healing Powers Podcast. And I started the podcast as part of my both physical and kind of spiritual and emotional healing and awakening. And so on the podcast, we get into the nitty gritty on the physical side to some very, kind of wild, esoteric stuff. Like I recently interviewed a man who worked for the, at the time, top secret spy program. We were using psychics to spy on Russia,
Wow.
And then I'll have someone who's focusing on like gluten intolerance, So, because I think that, it's important to look at all sides of our journey and that they're all connected.
Oh, absolutely. The spiritual, mental, body, physical. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoy it, and it's great for me. I love doing it because I get to connect with all these amazing people and share their knowledge, and then everyone else gets to benefit and hear from that as well. And by the way, if you're thinking of starting something yourself, whether it's a blog or a podcast or a video show or whatever, that you learn so much from the people that you connect with. So I think one of the reasons I've developed and been able to do a lot of things I have is that I'm constantly talking with these amazing people who have so much to share. And then it's not just the knowledge, but you literally absorb that energy and, ideas.
Yeah, and you kind of get integrated into a larger family system of
Absolutely.
We're all on the same team.
Absolutely. And even I believe we absorb thought patterns and beliefs. So if you're struggling with a lot of lack or feeling limited, feeling small, anything that we talked about on the show, struggling to manifest, connect with people who have that down, either in person or listen to podcasts or whatever, go to events, because you will inherently start to take some of that in.
That's good advice.
Yeah, it's wild. If I could just share a story, that the whole beliefs thing and patterns is wild. Like I'm one of those people that's like happily single. Like if I connect with someone and, we line up and we add to each other's lives, great. But I don't feel like I need that. And I was in Washington, D.C. and it was like, what is going on? Like every man I saw was like, maybe he could be with me. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this is so weird. And even like an older man that was totally not attractive or something. And it was just so bizarre. So I knew that this was coming externally. And then the next day I had a client and she was completely focused on a man. And it was just so amazing because I hadn't even met her in person yet. Like she was someone that
you were already tuning into her energy.
So I just want to share that as an example, because as soon as I made that realization and I was like, oh, that's where that's coming from, releasing that. Okay, thanks. No, thanks. For the information that I had for the reading, but I don't need that in my life. I don't want that energy. But I think people are constantly having those kinds of experiences and not aware. So when I started as a psychic, I was given the message that 80% of what I was feeling wasn't mine.
Oh.
And I recently did a reading where I got for her that 90% of what she was feeling wasn't her. So it's really important to just understand that your beliefs, your feelings, a lot of that may have been stuff you've just taken in and you just haven't learned to clear it out. Like, we learn to take a physical shower and physically clean ourselves or whatever, brush our teeth, but we don't learn how to energetically shift. And that's equally, if not more important, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It is. I found myself just like shut down.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm feeling bummed out or depressed or something. And I'm like, where is this coming from? This is not me. you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, finally, is this mine? Is it not mine? You know? And
yeah,
just,
that's the first most important thing to ask.
Yeah.
Is it mine? Okay, yes or no. If it's not mine, release. If it is mine, is this something I want to experience? And then you can, yes or no, and then you can ask for it to be shifted as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's really good. Wow. This has been so much fun. At the end of the show, we like the guest to give presents to. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my work, from the episode today, what is that one thing? It's this thing. What is that one thing for you?
It is that I think you can do almost anything that you set your mind to. And if people are not supporting that, maybe you need to get a different circle and shift your belief system. And just go forward, ask for help, and just don't let go of that vision, whatever it is.
Oh, so
I love
good.
it.
Laura, it has been so much fun to visit with you. Thank you for sharing your human journey and for being a part of ours.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Namaste.
Thanks for joining us here on Exploring the Human Journey. You can find us as a video on YouTube or listen to us as a podcast. You can also join in the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information, go to the website at exploringthehumanjourney.com.